Who's that talking, Michael?
Michael Clevey. Okay. Welcome to tonight's regular meeting of the Quilly Valley School District Board of Directors. We'll start out with a pledge of allegiance to a flag, if you can find a flag. If not, just imagine one in your mind. All right, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very nicely done. Okay. We'll start off tonight with a motion to accept and approve the minutes from our last regular meeting of April 13th, 2020. Is there such a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Were there any additions, deletions, or corrections? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That sounded pretty unanimous to me. All right. Is there a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Thanks,
We
Ron.
adopt the agenda.
Okay. Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
Okay. Any additions or changes to it that anybody has? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous too. Now we'll move on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda?
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
Thank you, Vijay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Kevin. Good for you. All right. Any questions on it?
No, but I have a comment. Diana, thanks for getting back to me.
You're welcome.
I was wondering on the hot spots. How many hot spots are we getting on that?
So this actually is equipment for 12 buses, and it's also a larger antenna that we're hoping to put on top of the radio station's antenna, so that we can drive buses into heavy populated areas of our community where there are a lot of kids who do not have access to good bandwidth, where they can log into our K-20 bandwidth and have better access to online platforms. So for example, Michael and Debbie and Nathan in our tech department have put together a map where we have little red spots, pin spots of where families are heavily concentrated. And again, this is actually not the hot spots, but this is actually equipment for the buses and equipment for a big umbrella or booster tower to put on top of the radio station. And I believe it will project all the way out to La Push. We did also deploy 60 hotspots to families, and we've got another 50 that should be here tomorrow or Tuesday. They were actually, some of them were loaned to us for free of charge from K-12. And then the other half, we are paying a small rental fee from K-12 monthly. And those hotspots give a gig a day for 30 days of the month. However, what we've learned already, and I'm going to share this in my presentation today, is that even with a gig, for some of the requirements of some of our individual platform or individual programs that kids need to access, if they're heavily with a lot of video, then it eats up that gig pretty fast. So I'll get into the more details on that. But again, this is to boost our or allow our students to access our K-20 bandwidth that the district is.
Is there an additional subscription fee for that every month, or is that just part of your online bandwidth that you've got?
Yeah, this is our bandwidth. Currently, we get it from, oh my goodness, over there by the West Twin. I can't remember which mountain it is. There's a microwave on top of that mountain, and it directly projects to the satellite dish that is for the right outside our building here at district office.
That's up in Ellis Mountain.
Ellis Mountain, yes. I was going to say it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Well, is the radio tower up and running yet? Or I heard that got bought by a private person and they're going to let us use it. Is that
That's
what's
the
happening?
plan so far, yes.
Yeah.
We're looking at what it would take to put up our own tower, but it's a pretty big ticket item. It's about $100,000 if we were going to get it licensed for all of the different components, airspace, and then get the engineering done so that it can withstand the winds. But that might be for next year. And my understanding is the Department of Commerce is
We're getting a lot of feedback. I can't.
Yeah, you might have to. Oh, there you go. And we do want to. There you go. Anyway, my understanding is that the Department of Commerce will be getting stimulus dollars to where we can access some of those funds for trying to get more bandwidth into each of our communities.
So,
Hey, Diane, on that bill for BMO, I believe it was for $10,000 and the invoice was for $7,600. So is there some stuff added onto that?
The BMO, that's our credit card. I can take a look at it. I cannot remember. It seems like we had almost $10,000 on that.
Yeah, but the invoice for I believe that purchase of the hotspots was BMO Harris commercial card. It's for $5,100. Is that right, or is that something different? That's the antenna.
Yes.
I know it sounds kind of weird. So it comes through the same vendor.
So that we just put it on there for the 5187.71. So you were aware of what that was, but we charged it to the BMO credit card.
Oh, so you put it on a credit card. Okay, that was confusing me.
So we could get them here within 2 weeks time. So we could, those all have to be programmed and I shouldn't say program, but set up before we can get our system up and running.
Yeah, this was confusing because it was a commercial card and I was kind of wondering why it was on there, but now I understand. And then what's the concerned citizen bill for 16,000? What is that?
So those are for our 0 to 2-year-olds. For any families, they don't have an IEP, but they have a IFSP. It's basically a family plan to support any 0 to 2-year-olds who have developmental delays. And that's how we serve those students. And so we have a contract with concerned citizens. That money comes to us and then we funnel it. They bill us based on how many of those IFSPs, the individual family support plans, are in place. So we've had this partnership for quite a while, but it will be changing next year. The money will no longer funnel through us. It'll go directly to the local designated local association who does that. So concerned citizens will get it. It won't come through us anymore.
Okay, thanks. I got a couple more if you bear with me. I just want to know what is Herman charging us for the chips for the boiler?
Doggone it. I knew you were going to ask me that question and I should have looked it up, but I think it's somewhere, I could pull up the receipt. It's somewhere 80 per green ton, about $88 per green ton.
Yeah, we spent 5,700 on that.
Yeah.
And then also during this time we have subcontractors that work for us, right? Like John.
Yes.
We're still paying him. Is he working afar or communicating with the kids that he needs to be communicating with?
Yes. So he's still providing services and helping us with all of our keeping in the special ed annual review of the IEPs look a little bit different, and we've got a little bit of leeway on timelines. But I would say that overall, any of our contracted services where we're paying them are continuing to do services or we're not paying them.
Okay, so how does I know we still pay for the college, also the colleges, even though are the students in college going to school, or how do we keep in track of that?
Yeah, so that's our Running Start programs, and you see all of those colleges on the vendors that we pay, because those are mostly Running Start students. But they're in their last quarter for the year, and my understanding is that all of the colleges, junior colleges, are running online programs. And so students are receiving services. Again, the money comes into Quileute Valley School District, and we either disperse it to Insight. No, I'm sorry. It comes to us, and then we disperse it to the junior colleges for those Insight students or for Peninsula College.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, then if there are no more questions, all those in favor of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sounded unanimous again. So now we go to reports. Financial.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to present now. I'm hoping. So give me just a second.
Sure.
Can you see that?
I can.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I thought I'd start with an empty stage. I think this past weekend we would have had our drama department present their play. So I'm really sorry that they weren't able to do so. They were going to present the musical Chicago. So for the budget status report, and again, I apologize. I didn't have this uploaded until late last night, and then I had to make a couple of changes today. But the revenues for this month were based on 9% apportionment. So we received 3.7 million. Our expenditures were 3.9, and this typically is a month that we will oftentimes see where we spend more money than we actually get in our apportionment. And so for the net cash and investments in the general fund for March of 2020, you can see the history. And originally, when I pulled this up, we're currently at 9%, but I saw in here where 2016 and 17 and 2017 and 2018 looked really dismal. That actually was an anomaly each year, because in 2016, 2017, I don't know if you remember this, but the state, I think it was the levy dollars were off, and we had to pay back money because of a mistake on their, the way they were calculating those. And then in 2017, 2018, we actually did not have a meeting at one point there was a gap I can't remember what the circumstances were. So those were anomalies, but we are currently at 9%. So if you want to look at what our net and cash investments look here, you can see for the month of March, we dipped down a little bit. We're going to see April shoot up. In fact, in talking with Jan, prior to this meeting, we're probably going to be at about 5 million in April, which is good. That's where we want to be, especially when we're heading into some dire straight times with our budget. And a good portion of that is going to depend on, that for the month of April is our tax collection. Second half, for the first half, I think we received 60%, a little over 400,000. And we should see the remainder, although that will be determined a little bit later. And so again, we're going to see that dollar figure shoot up way into about $5 million if our projections are right. And so I know that was one of the questions VJ had in talking with him a little bit via text messaging today. So questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. And so then if we look at our monthly budget status report, that's the last part, that's item number 2 with the financial report. Again, I think one of the questions was, are we seeing any decline with our utility bills? And because this is the month of March and we did not send staff home until the 3rd week in March, I think the kids home after the 2nd week in March. We haven't seen that yet, but Jan and I both predict that our water bills, our utility will be way down. We have kept heat on in the buildings, mainly for maintenance and for our maintenance staff. And then again, just for the maintaining our buildings. And we've tried to be mindful with that. That's why we got an additional load of chips to get us through to where we actually turn off our biomass boiler. But we are predicting that we'll see those utility bills go down. Our revenues are still coming in as expected. We're not seeing any disruption to this current fiscal year. Don't know if we will, but again, we're seeing cost savings and we've had no extracurricular activities, no diesel for our buses. I mean, other than again, paying for all of our personnel, our staff costs, we should see a decline in a lot of the expenditures. We're also not spending our professional development dollars and some of our grants, which at this point is a little bit scary because we're not sure we'll have carryover dollars in our federal grants and how that'll look. But overall, again, if you look at even in our debt service fund, I think we continue to get state funding for DNR lands. We budgeted $60,000, and again, this goes in our debt service fund, and we currently have $136,000 in that area.
So is it possible to, if you're going to lose the PD money, to spend it in advance?
If we could know what kind of professional development that our staff could go to, again, because things are in such fluctuation, we have utilized funds for things, for example, for GLAD training, which is a strategy to use for language acquisition. And I might be mistaken, but I think we have over 15 staff members who are doing that training, and it is online. We're also getting ready to train administrators and a cadre of teachers on and kind of flipping the model from a brick and mortar to more of an online platform, because there's a different way of teaching and thinking to delivering that model. And we will be enrolling staff there. So we're going to do our best to utilize those dollars sensibly. But again, it's hard to tell for the training that we normally do in person. I think will be different next year. I think it'll look very different. So that is about all I have for the March budget status report. Again, it's good news. It's not bad news at this point, and that is what we're anticipating, what the state has told us. There's no disruption to our apportionment so far.
So your grant monies, if you don't spend those, do you lose them?
So typically it depends on the grant. Some you can carry over 10%, some you can carry over 100%. During COVID, I would just say that anything is possible. That we really don't know what any of that will look like, other than we know we're going to be in dire straits going into the next biennium. And so we're not spending just to spend in those areas. If we have a purpose to spend, we will. That's the best I can tell you.
So, real quick question on that. If you do have carryover money, do they reduce it next year by that much? Or do you get extra, or we end up with extra?
Well, in any normal year,
Yeah.
again, depending on the grant. So, for example, I know
Well,
in our,
let's say you got 100% carryover. Would you get that grant funded again at 100% next year? So you'd have,
yes,
would you be responsible for spending the 200?
percent.
Yeah, the 200%.
Yeah, and that doesn't happen very often, but let's say that you can carry over as much of a grant as possible. Let's say we ended up with 40,000 we hadn't spent on, or we'd spent out 60% and there was 40% carryover, then we would roll that on top of the 60% or the full funding for the next year. We'd have to have a better plan. Obviously, if you do that every year, there's other problems that you would have.
Yeah.
But we have been told that we cannot guarantee we're going to get our carryover this year. It's difficult. A lot of the way we spend our professional development dollars is through added time pay and in-person events. The in-person events, I think, are the most, where there's travel, where a group of teachers or a group of educators go to Seattle, wherever, for a specific training, and those just aren't happening. So the travel dollars are usually what we spend, and we're not spending those.
Gotcha. Okay. Is that it on finance?
That's all I've got. Again, so we still think that this year will be, our apportionment will come in as normal. At least that's what we've been told. It will be sometime next year when we'll see the huge deficits.
Okay. Well, that's something to look forward to, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Then the last thing that I have here is, again, we've met our 5% minimum fund balance, non-spendable, or those dollars are reserved. I know we have some extra learning assistance program dollars and some inventory that's at 0.35%. So total of 5.35%. And then we have an additional 3.41% of unreserved, undesignated. And again, I think the goal is to get that dollar number as big as possible. So if the deep cuts come, we have, and again, this isn't just about, it's making sure that we've got enough cash flow so that we can carry over each month when things get really rough. Because as you know, each month the apportionment looks different. And when there's a real low number of apportionment, you want to make sure you can continue to pay your payroll. And of course, your big contracts like our Insight School of Washington. From what we can tell now, we think we will be okay for next year. But again, things change weekly, sometimes daily. And so we're bracing ourselves and preparing for the worst case scenario.
Okay. On to COVID.
All right, so stop me if you guys have questions through this. But again, the cancellation for the remainder of the school year, the next $1 million question is, what will next year look like? I think is kind of the big message that all states are grappling with right now. It has been consistently communicated to us from multiple areas that we need to prepare for any scenario as we open the next school year. And so if you're wondering what that could potentially look like, and I've heard any of these 4 scenarios there could be some other possible ones that we're not even sure of right now. It could mean that we would continue in this pattern that we are right now, which means we don't open our brick and mortar schools, but we continue to have some type of remote learning plan. It might look like we have small groups of students for instruction. Probably more than likely it would be our more vulnerable students. And we would continue the remote learning with a greater good of students. It could be that we open for all students, but there would be some type of rotation plan. And the goal there would be that we would be able to enforce social distancing. I believe the CDC is coming up with different models that schools could implement. And then it will be up to each state, depending on their COVID data and what's happening, to make the local decisions. The best case scenario is that we open up our doors as a regular school for the next year. And I know that in sitting on several meetings at the state level, there's a push from the superintendent group across the state to put pressure so that this decision will be made. And again, I get that our governor is responding to the data, and you can't anticipate what that's going to look like. But it's very difficult to plan for the following school year when we don't know what the situation will be. Right now, our buildings are planning schedules for students as though our doors are going to be open as a regular school year. That's our hope. Should we learn differently, then we'll plan for any of the other scenarios.
So if the governor dictates or lifts the closure and says we can go back to school, do local schools have any power or say as to whether or not it truly is safe in their area to go back to school?
Yeah, that's where we rely on our own health, our county health departments. As you know, when this started back in late February, 1st of March, there was a school district in the Seattle area that shut down. I think they were the first, and we were kind of had our mouths open, and we were kind of going, what's going on? But it was communicated early on that if our health department felt like it was a safety issue for our students, they would let us know, and then we would go to our local school boards to shut schools down. So we do have that opportunity across the state to even impose a more restrictive component if need be. And that would would be for any, but we couldn't do the opposite of what the governor said. We have to, at minimum, do what the governor's proclamation is. So we can't go the other way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the president was saying today in his briefing that he was hoping that some schools could open for a little while, even a short period before the end of the school year. So I don't think many governors are quite there yet.
So I forgot to change the date on the next one. It should be, I updated the data based on what I learned this morning. So this is actually of Monday, April the 27th, for those of you who are listening. But we've had 1,028 tested. And actually the 14 positive moved up to 16 positive. So I didn't get that, with 11 of the 16 recovered, 977 negative, 37 pending tests. I think there were 2 other positives this weekend, not in the Forks area, but somewhere else in the county. And
do you know what the Forks count is? The West End count?
2.
Okay.
2. So the county does have more tests in their hands, and they're going to begin testing anyone with respiratory signs, whereas that hadn't necessarily been the case before. One thing the county has noted, they've been watching traffic patterns, and they've seen an uptick in traffic patterns, and that's one of the other gauges on sometimes the spreading of the virus. But overall, what we're doing, especially locally in Forks and locally in the county, they believe is really working for our area. So that's good news.
Okay.
And then again, you've seen these priorities. You're going to see them over and over again, the 5 priorities, and I'll give you a little bit of an update. So we do continue to serve our meals. You can see there the tables outside. I think it looks a little bit differently with the rain. But on the average, we're getting between 7,000 and 8,000 weekly, which really means we are serving half of that, because remember, we're combining the sacks. Everything's in the breakfast and the lunch items are in the sack. Again, I just say thanks to our cafeteria workers and our volunteer paid helpers who are making this happen each day. I forgot to mention, we're going to take a look at our expenditures for our food. Jan, I think for the month of March, it was 18,000. And she said it didn't seem higher than what it normally is because we're not getting all of our commodity components. But I will tell you, it's a challenge for ordering the supplies. As I stated last time, we are getting the supplies through, I think, 6 different vendors, and it's hit and miss the supply. It's not that the items aren't there. It's just that the way the whole system is working is kind of erratic at this point. So we never know from week to week what items we will be able to get and what we can't get. So priority number 2, and Ron, I think you had asked last week, and I just didn't have the data in my hands, about graduating seniors. That's our priority number 2. So currently for the class of 2020, we have 67 seniors. If we look back on February the 29th, 65 of those seniors were on track to graduate according to their high school and beyond plans, of which 13 had specific support plans for some type of credit recovery. So when we were looking at on track to graduate, that would mean if those 13 also kicked in what they needed to for credit recovery. We have additional following students who are graduating: a 5th-year alternative student and 2 6th-year homeschool plus students. Not graduating are 2 seniors in the class of 2020. Whoops. Sorry about that. 1 senior in homeschool plus for the class of 2020, 2 5th-year seniors, and 1 6th-year senior. So that kind of gives you a feel about our graduating class.
So the 13 seniors that have support plans, are they engaging with the teachers to get those done?
Well, so here's one of the components that I think threw everything off. But when we first went into the kids went home, if you remember, it was communicated to us that if we couldn't give access to online for every student, then we couldn't do the online component. And so we shut down the credit recovery, which is done through Edgenuity 2020, which is a full online component where kids access their modules via that app or application. And so we shut it down, I think, for 2, if not 3 weeks. Then OSPI came back and said, wait a minute, we get it. If you're going to serve kids, you got to figure out who has technology, who doesn't. So then we put it back online. I believe that Cindy and her team are assessing that right now. In a week and a half to 2 weeks, we're going to have to report what the level of engagement is. And that would mean that students are actually accessing lessons, and that we can identify that they're making progress in those. So stay tuned on that one.
So there could be additional 13 that not graduate then. So are the seniors engaged? So I know Cindy's probably not on here, right? But she might be listening. But it'd be interesting to see how many of the seniors they've been in contact with, because their grade can't change, right? They've already graduated basically from February 29th.
No, so what the plan is for our, and you can read it in the resolution that you're going to pass tonight, is that we make a good faith effort to have the seniors engage and complete whatever credits they were on track to complete. And again, in good faith means that we've given them opportunities and they participated at some level. And then the next component is that if there are, and everything has to be documented on the high school and beyond plans. And so I met with Cindy and Deanna Shaw and Connie Munson, the high school counselor registrar, on Friday. And they were going back through every single high school and beyond plan to make sure that they have the correct information. I know that Cindy personally has reached out, and I think she made phone contact with every senior but two. I could be wrong about that. And since then has probably reached those two. And so we did apply for the waiver through State Board of Education that would allow us to look at each individual student. And let's say there are extenuating circumstances. Let's say a student doesn't have a place to live, had to move in with somebody in Squim, doesn't have access to the internet or connectivity in any way. We would have to waive those based on a case by case scenario. And the state has come out with language that says as long as the district has in good faith done everything they can in their power, and that we do no harm to kids. That doesn't mean that we don't hold them accountable, and that doesn't mean that they just get to walk away and not finish anything. I believe when it's all said and done, we'll have seniors all over the map. And again, it will be up to Cindy and her team to carefully work with each student and family to make sure that we've done the very best we can. That's what the in good faith component is. We've not heard back. I think the State Board of Education has to actually approve those waivers. We've not heard back yet. I'm pretty certain that we'll get it like the rest of them, but it's just a process we go through. So tonight you're going to pass the resolution that has that language in there, which is basically what I just described.
What are we using for a grading system? I saw on TV where the Seattle School District is using, if you turn your stuff in, then and it's completed, you just get an A, automatic A. So if everybody's doing that, isn't that going to skewer the numbers a little bit for all students?
It's a good question, Mike, and we'll get to that. And you're absolutely right. But the thing that's going to be skewed is on every student transcript across the nation, and it's going to look different in different states, in different schools. There's going to be a big asterisk by that student's grade that says COVID. And so we do have options at Forks High School, and I'm ahead of myself in the presentation. Due to the nature of such a diverse group of kids we're working with and multiple background scenarios. For example, I know we have some seniors who are now having to work full time. That doesn't mean they're off the hook. If any of them happen to be listening tonight or their parents, they absolutely have to engage. But we've decided to go for the similar that Seattle, and there are other schools in our region who will be doing that, who use the A if students engage and turn assignments in. And if they do not, then they get an incomplete. And we have a mechanism when they come back to give them an opportunity to complete the work. We also have the option of going an A, B, C, or I, or an A, B, C, D, or I. And so, for example, Insight School of Washington students, they haven't missed a beat. They believe it's fair and equitable to do the A, B, C, D because those students have been engaged 100% with everyone having the same platform. It's not an equity issue. I believe it's going to be very difficult for us in Forks due to the lack of accessibility and having an online system in place to reach every kid. And that way, the best scenario for us is to do no harm with an A or an incomplete. So you're right, Mike.
Yeah, but we're still doing the hard copies, right? To anyone that can't get online, they're still getting the packets to complete.
Yes, and we have surveyed each family to find out what meets their needs best. I'll get into that a little bit more here in just a second.
Okay.
But yeah, they could have either way, hard copy materials, an online sort of system, or a hybrid of both. And again, if we look at what our teachers are comfortable, not every teacher has gone through all the training that it requires for switching over to utilizing our online platform, the Google Education. And then again, the biggest barrier that we have in Forks is the the bandwidth. And many of our students, now we've gotten the hotspots out, but they have spotty access to the Verizon tower, or they have to get in a car and drive to where they can get access, or you name it. It's all over the map. Some don't even have access to that. So you may have heard on April the 17th at 8 o'clock, 20, if you're looking at military time, from 20 to 2020 and 20 seconds, we lit up every school district across the state lit up their high school stadium, put 2020 on the board. Of course, we had a bus parade, if you will. It was not a parade because we're not allowed to have parades according to the governor's proclamation. But the bus drivers each drove around, honked for that 20 minutes. And that was, again, to try to build a climate as best we could with the circumstances, and honoring especially our seniors who have not had an opportunity to participate in the spring sports. So again, Cindy and Connie, our high school principal, and Deanna Shaw, our registrar, they met on Friday to review and go over senior high school and beyond plans to make sure they absolutely have everything documented as to what a student was doing and what they will continue to do to the remainder of the year. In order to apply for a waiver, we have to have documentation on every single student, what the circumstance was if we were to apply for that waiver or apply those waivers to a student's credit. Again, outreach has been ongoing in multiple forums to ensure they are engaging. And soon I will be asking all of the buildings to respond to engagement, the level of engagement, as we'll have to be reporting to the state superintendent. And soon we'll be looking at what the class of 2020 graduation ceremony might look like. We're holding off as long as possible, and I know that other school districts are doing this as well, to see if there's any potential to do a late summer graduation. I know that Peninsula College just announced they've moved their ceremony from June to August. And again, that is going to depend highly on the governor's proclamation and what he lifts. And so stay tuned on this one. Our goal is to have some sort of graduation ceremony. The worst case scenario, I think, for our seniors would be that it's completely virtual. Insight School of Washington, who has always done an in-person graduation, has already determined to do theirs online or virtually. Most importantly, because they have to rent a pretty huge facility and do not want to encumber the dollars that it takes to reserve a facility and have the opportunity to lose that. And so they've already made their decision. Locally, we'd like to wait as long as we can. In the event that we could have an in-person one later on in the summer, we're pretty certain that we won't be able to have one in June, at least is the indication that the governor has given to our state superintendent.
Hey, a quick question. It's sort of related to graduation. Certainly part of the year was somebody was doing an annual. So I would guess maybe it was kind of partway down. Is there any talk of maybe finishing it next year, or is anybody working on it now? Is it just going to be written off? Just curious.
I don't know. I'll ask Cindy where we are with that. I know that at the junior high level, and it might have even been at the intermediate level, they are continuing to finalize theirs and get theirs out. I saw in one of Elena's communication to her parents, I think it's at the junior high level, they're going to be finishing theirs, and I would assume the high school would do so as well.
Okay.
We are getting in a little bit better of a rhythm of what we can call our continuous learning system. I think each week we get a little bit stronger. It is a hybrid system, meaning, and again, imagine if you have a family of 5 and are all trying to get on to some kind of data plan. We've had families who say they only want hard copy packets. Some who can do 100% online, and so again, it's a little bit of a juggling act for our teachers, but I believe they're getting into a better rhythm. For example, I know in talking to Elena at the intermediate school, I think 75% of their packets were picked up that they had ready to go out today. And she said they're getting about 50% of their work back in from kids. It looks different in different buildings. Something that I think is really important to think about here, and I hadn't really thought of it like this. This came up in a superintendent's meeting, but the average K-12 student who goes to school, kindergarten through 12, has 13,700 hours of instruction. And so, in my mind, in listening to this conversation, the most important gap that we need to fill is for the kindergartners, first graders, second graders, and third graders, because their time is very limited right now. Them missing 300 hours of instruction is really important. And I'm not saying it's not for the remainder of the kids, because it certainly is. But the older you get, the gap of that 300, unless you're a very vulnerable kid who has a lot of skill deficits, those 300 hours is not going to be as devastating as the ones at the earlier years.
I agree with you that it's important for those kids, but Diana, you'll have to forgive me, but it seems to me it was probably 15 to 25 years ago that there was a book making the rounds, and the title of it was "School Can Wait." Are you familiar with it at all?
That doesn't ring a bell. I'm
Well,
sorry.
you can keep a kid out of school until he's 7, 9, and they'll catch up within a matter of a few months. At least that was the contention of the author at the time.
Could very well be. I think it's really dependent on the student. It's dependent on their environment and what other things they're engaged in.
You bet.
Bunch of other multiple pieces of information there, but I would agree. So some of our observations again at this point, and again, I think we're still learning. I still go back to the building the plane as we're flying. Even with the distribution of Chromebooks, and I think we distributed about 400 Chromebooks, 60 hotspots today with another 50. There are some huge bandwidth or even access to any Verizon tower at all. The hotspots we got are with Verizon. Teachers are setting up Google Classrooms for online learning. Some of our teachers are more proficient than others. Some have used it consistently since we brought a Google education platform up 4 years ago, and some are just now learning. We've learned that Google Hangouts and other online systems with videoing, such as YouTube, some of the more robust programs that we have use too much data. And so again, it's not sustainable unless the bandwidth component was addressed in our community. And this isn't something we're just now learning about. We've known about it. I think for a remote community like Forks, we have pretty good access when I'm listening to other superintendents talk. But we are not like the I-5 corridor or other places. Anyways, again, some families prefer hard copies or a combination. We have surveyed each family. From what I'm hearing, we're almost overwatering by calling too much. They're getting multiple phone calls. Some of the feedback I've received at this point.
So you said, excuse me,
Go ahead.
you said Elena was getting 50% of her homework turned back in. Do we know what Matt's getting back in, or Cindy?
I don't have those that data at my fingertips. And again, I will give you a better idea of that. I have to report that to the state in a week and a half or 2 weeks, I think, not this next Wednesday, the following. So at the next board meeting, I'll have more accurate data. One thing we're noting with the online program, our Insight School of Washington, it's harder to engage those kids now because of the message that they're hearing across the state from other students that they're not having to do as much. And again, even though our kids haven't missed a beat, it is taking more of our staff's time to make sure they're keeping engaged in the Insight School of Washington component. And again, I think it's just a byproduct of what's happening across the state, what's in the news, what they're hearing from their friends who aren't in an online program, a full online program, and whatnot. But we do expect our students to participate either in some way, hard copy, online, a mixture of both. The state does expect us, though, to do no harm. And I think I gave you some good examples. Let's say a family, students had to go to work if they could find work, or they have no place to live, or there could be multiple things that we need to be sensitive to when we're working with our students because of the COVID period. We will not be holding back any students in grades K-8 for the upcoming year. And again, that is a state guidance or state ruling, so to speak, unless there's some kind of mutual understanding between a family and the school to do so. So what it looks like in grades K-8, students' work will be assessed on a system of showing whether or not they're progressing toward the grade level standard. They'll get either a satisfactory or an incomplete. And again, when we get to the end of the year or the beginning of next year, it is going to be expected that we figure out a system to get information or to get additional teaching for the incompletes. And then for the high school again, the A or I is what we have landed on at Forks High School for the reasons that I talked about earlier. And then Insight, because they haven't missed a beat, the A, B, C, D, or I. So questions that you have around that? I just want to put this up here again because I think that as we're learning again, this is the recommendation guidelines for student commitment each day from OSPI, and they're basing this on models of online learning or homeschool learning, but they're stating that for pre-K, no more than 30 minutes a day. For grades K1, 45 minutes a day. And so what it might look like is that 2 days a kid works on reading, 2 days on math, and then the following day. And it can look any way, of course, depending on family guidelines. And then you can see that progress in the 9th through 12th grades. So again, I talked about training for online teaching. There's a paradigm shift because high school teachers are used to, I know I'm a former teacher, that I have my 6 periods or I'm teaching 5 periods of 6 periods, and I'm teaching 55 minutes. And that is not the case when you're looking at students learning on their own remotely via hard packets or online learning. The expectation is 3 hours maximum per day. So how those 6 courses are going to look a lot differently than in the traditional brick and mortar school of 55 minute periods of 6 hours or 6 periods, so to speak.
What do you know about AP exam?
So the AP exam, they're going to do their AP exam online. I know that the AP teachers haven't missed a beat. And again, that is primarily because of College Board and the support that they've given to the teachers with online opportunities. And the kids have had access to those online opportunities as well.
And the ACT and SAT are pretty much off the table for this year.
They are off the table, yes. Yeah. So then priority number 4 is to pay employees. We're continuing to pay our employees. We'll do so through August with this school year through a regular apportionment. We are expected to get COVID dollars or CARE Act dollars sometime in July or August. We just don't know how we're going to be able to use them, or if we apply them to the, I'm assuming we're going to apply them to the 2020, 2021 year, but I could be wrong. We are tracking employee work through our Talent Ed system. That's the system you guys now log on to sign things. And so my understanding is that we may have to code, especially our paraeducators, differently because they're actually not doing their job in the same way that they would now. And that's going to be part of the CARE Act. Our staff have done a great job completing those daily records. I just put this picture up here. This is a picture of how our teachers are still working and communicating with each other. I think this was one of our EL teachers demonstrating a YouTube lesson that he had prepared for his students. And again, it just shows you how teachers are able to continue to work together quite like we're doing right now as well.
On paying employees, because we didn't have any spring sports, what about our coaches for the spring sports?
So the coaches for our high school programs had already started coaching. And so the state advice is that we continue to pay them throughout the season. It was not the same case for the junior high or middle school sports. They had not started their season, but it was recommended from OSPI that we continue to pay those stipends. So we are.
So the coaches got paid for a whole season when they had about 1 week of practice. That's wrong. Wrong.
So for budget development for the 2020-21 year, there's so many moving targets. It's difficult to plan. I think if you went back to the slide where I talked about 4 different scenarios of how we open up the next school year and what it's actually going to look like for the entire year, that's programmatic development. We don't know what it's going to look like. So it's very difficult to figure out how we're going to spend our money. We're working on our budget revenues, utilizing what's called the F203. That's language in Jan's world. Those are where we project what our state funds are. Our only concern, again, is let's say that we get to the end of the school year and we haven't been able to engage 30% of our students. We don't even know if they are around or if we will be able to keep them for the opening year. And so again, our enrollment can be really down at the beginning of the next year. We are going to project our brick and mortar budget based on enrollment numbers, just a little bit under of what we budgeted for this year, right around 950 FTE full-time equivalents. I'm working with Insight School of Washington. We are predicting that we're going to see their enrollments increase because of, again, this gap that's happening now. And we think that parents may engage or want to be assured that they're going to have a very strong program online as opposed to not knowing what the school year is going to look like. Although we don't really know on that. The only other thing I think I shared with you at our last meeting, and this is to show you how quickly things change, is I think I had talked about the state recognizing that they would probably have a billion deficit, they've already projected now that it's anywhere between 5 and 8 billion, and that's for the next biennium. We received a letter from the Office of Financial Management at the state level to reduce as much as we could. We have decided as a school district right now, at least based on the information that we have, is we're going to do reductions through attrition. So you might start hearing about other school districts that are going to reduce in force, which is a RIF. So currently we have a hiring freeze. We already know that we have approximately $500,000 that we can cut through positions that we will not refill.
Through attrition?
Through attrition, yes.
Okay.
But $500,000 doesn't get us very far. Should we learn something differently within this current week, we may have to do more a bigger reduction of some sort. But right now, we think this will at least get us through this next year with our undesignated unreserves on top of that.
So we already know of at least 10 people, about 10 people who aren't coming back or are retiring?
It's 5 people now.
5 people.
Remember that because of that higher level in salaries or the change in McCleary plus benefits, the average FTE for a certificated teacher is about $100,000 when you look at
Right.
benefits added. But we have a mixture of certificated and paraeducators who have resigned. The bad thing, it might not be the position we want. So we have already talked to the union and especially the certificated union. We talked to them on Friday and let them know that there may be some changes in assignment based on filling the needs that we have.
Okay, and is the May 15th date, are you guys still on track to get commitments by May 15th or?
So I think what we are hearing, and I think this is the next, okay, yeah, here, I'll go into this component.
Okay.
So one thing that we know we can expect is that there will be federal dollar reductions, but they probably won't be until January of 2021. And so that might be our Title I dollars. That might be our Title I is compensatory ed. Most of those dollars are at the elementary school for intervention components. We also know it could be with our professional development funds, which is our Title II dollars. So to give you an example, and COVID is nothing like the 2008 economic downfall, but this is the only point of reference I have, or TJ Kelly, who's our state level financial director. We talk about the 2008 downturn, but we saw federal reductions of 10% back then. So we were thinking this could be 10 to 20%, who knows? Basic education is protected by the Washington State Constitution in that we have to provide every student with free and appropriate public education. However, they've warned us that local effort assistant, that's our levy equalization, our LEA, local effort assistant, which matches our levy dollars, is not necessarily protected, but it is highly political and debatable. If you remember with the McCleary decision, there still was no clear delineation between basic ed and some of the LEA funds. There could be other reductions. We've heard potentially our learning assistance program. And so that might mean all of our supplemental services, summer school program. I cannot believe that there won't be some kind of relief through COVID relief funds for compensatory ed because of the loss of instruction that we have for kids. And then there could also be a change to our K-3 class size. Currently, we're funded fully. If we have 17-1, they could lift that legislative motion. And again, I think the key with any of this is legislators are going to be the ones that will come back and redefine what law is in place for any of this to happen. And so I was reading something in the Seattle time or the Seattle Times yesterday, or maybe it was this morning, where Senator Rolfes and some of the senators in the House Ways and Means Committee were talking about that they don't even have enough information at this point to make any good decisions, nor a way to meet, because they generally meet in person. And so they more than likely won't convene before January. So the cuts will probably be after January 2021. We just don't know what they'll look like. And then it will be highly political because it's a year when there's elections. And then again, we do know we're going to receive some CARE Act stimulus funds. It'll probably be in July or August, and we don't know what we'll be able to use them for. So again, it's hard to plan for next year when we really don't have any of this information. And then we already have put in an application at the federal level in the event that there's any FEMA grants. We are one of 3 school districts in the state of Washington that has what's called a hazard mitigation plan in place, which puts us at the top end for the state of Washington to apply for any grants. If you remember, that's how we got our generator. So if there are stimulus dollars for turnkey construction plans or anything, that might be an opportunity for us to apply, and we would be in the top of the line to receive those funds. And that brings me to the next. I did contact our architect to find out, and he was going to do some poking around with people that he knew at the legislative level or federal level. I asked him if he were to, how quickly it would be for them to get plans to finalize for. If you can see down here at the bottom, this eyesore right here, that's the stadium. It's a beautiful picture that was taken on April the 17th. He said that they could probably get everything in place, meaning the architectural and engineering and electrical, civic engineering, everything done within 3 months. And so if we learn next month, it might behoove us to pay those architectural and engineering fees to get a plan ready in the event there were stimulus funds for a stadium.
Who took the picture?
I believe Kim Weisenfalls did with her drone.
It is. It's a beautiful shot.
So one of the things that I've learned is patience. I think last week was an extremely challenging week because we're really trying to figure out what this looks like still. It's a very humbling experience. And I just want to send the message to our families and to our staff, and especially our students, that it's patience. And really that what that means is to trust that it's going to get better. And we'll do our best to make it better. But in the meantime, have some patience. It's challenging for educators for sure, no matter what position you're in. And then again, the last goal for daycare, we really don't have a need. I did receive a phone call from someone in La Push wondering if they had a need, if we would open up something, but I've not heard back from them. And again, I think that was in the spirit of as last resort in the event that you had a huge COVID outbreak in your hospital where your staff were working 16 hours and they had nowhere for daycare. So we're not in that boat. So questions? That's a lot of information.
Yeah, Diana, it was a lot of information, and keep us updated. I also read the principal's weekly bulletin on what they're doing for the week, which looks like it's a pretty busy week. One of the questions I did see on the high school is the hours that are being manned in the office at the high school. It's a 4-hour window. I think each day one of the secretaries or one of the people are in there to answer phone calls to get back to people. I was just kind of wondering why it isn't a full-time position, that even though they're sharing it 1 day a week and they work 5 days a week regularly, why can't they be in there all day instead of just half a day to answer phones and call? I think she had scheduled, like Cindy was going to take a day, and Sue and Tina and Lauren and Deanna. So they're each sharing a day, mostly from about 10 to 2 or 11 to 3. So if people are calling in to get responses back during this time, I would think that we should man at least one person a day like you do at your district office. And I'm not sure about the other buildings either. So
That's a good question. And again, I think the initial response was send everybody home to keep daily contact with others as remote as possible. And we'll look into that, Ron, and figure out a plan, see if that's needed, number one, and two, if it really is within the governor's idea of proclamation of working remotely as possible. I do know that on Mondays when we distribute our lessons, there are a lot of individuals. There were a lot of cars there today, but it's hard to get that amount of work out with fewer staff. By the way, I do have a couple of updates here. I just checked my phone, and my text messages are coming in. Matt says they're getting about 50% of their work in. Meaning they send out more, but 50% return. Cindy said that they have had contact with every single senior, and they're continuing to work and finalize the annual. So the Spartan annual will be complete as well.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, that was something to look at, I guess. And I'm not sure, like I said, Matt didn't have it in his bulletin of who is staff there in the office, but I know there's probably a lot of people calling and trying to get a hold of people of what's going on, but you would think we'd want to leave that window open as long as possible. And they are kind of confined within the office space, so people don't even have to go in. Anyway, and then on the YouTube videos from the teachers, I've watched those. Those are pretty interesting, and getting lessons out to the kids. I think that's a good way of communicating, even though they are short. I think they're beneficial. Out there, I watched them, and you could watch them also if you have a chance. So anyway, that's all I think I have on questions on that.
So I think the last thing, and then I'll open up for more questions. We just received notification from the State Board of Education. They recognize schools based on standout data that looks different from other school districts that look similar to them with demographics. So our elementary school is receiving a recognized school award. And basically what that means, in looking at the data from 2017 to 18 to 2018 to 19, the state recognized that our English language learners showed exponential growth from the previous year, which was higher than the state level when compared to other schools that look like our data that have similar demographics. And so kudos to not only our English language learning program, but all of our staff. I know it takes a whole team, and I believe that the governor is going to make reference to Forks in one of his press conferences. He's not going to name Forks, but he's going to talk about a remote area, which is doing really, really well. If you look at the picture there those are our two paid helper distributors, 2 of our 3, but that's an example of what I think that's Forks Elementary School packets that they help distribute. And some of the families do not have transportation, and so they literally they take the school van, and they drive and drop off student work to homes and then pick it up. I guess I'm really thankful again for the stamina that our staff have to work through a lot of our challenges. And then I just put it out there for any parent who might be listening. I hear that we're getting a lot more watches, especially on the YouTube channel after it's live streamed. I think one meeting we had over 200 views of it, which is probably the most participation we've had. But if you're a parent listening and you have specific questions or concerns, I would hope that you would contact your student's teacher or advisor or building principal, because we're here to help you through the challenging times. So other questions that you might have?
I had one on the,
Go ahead.
I had a question on the, some days of the week are busier than others. Like today, there was quite a few cars around there. So your janitorial staff, are they just on the same schedule they've had, or are they kind of?
No,
Kind of a-
they are doing, they're starting to already go into their summer hours, meaning they are prepping the building, doing deep cleaning, things that they would do during the summertime, but they are, for the majority, working a full shift here, at least 5 hours, and then doing some of their work at home for professional development. If the governor takes that next level and releases more employees back, we'll put them on a full-time schedule back here. Bill and his team are working on projects. They're building a shed for the alternative school behind the school. They're doing all kinds of projects right now as well. And so they're here, they're working.
Okie doke. Thank you, Diana. That was a lot of information, but good information. I guess it's board report time. Maybe I should just ask, does any of you have a board report to do? Mike says no, Ron says no, VJ says no. Kevin, what about you?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I'm good too, most days. Okay. Then we'll move on to new business. Number one on the list is the Forks and Education Association Memorandum of Understanding. I think that's a motion. Is there a motion to approve it?
I move we adopt the resolution.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any questions or discussion about it? Now's the time.
Yeah, good faith. I assume that good faith also means that seniors, for instance, who aren't making contact will get the I.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, are you on the graduation resolution?
I thought I was.
We're on number one. The
I beg
FBA memo of understanding.
I beg your pardon.
That's okay.
Well, I'm on the full screen, so I got to pull up the agenda. I apologize.
No problem. Sounds
Last time I looked, that wasn't a link. And it's still not a link.
Yeah, I had sent you this, I think, in a separate email.
I'll have to abstain because I don't know anything. And I would ask that I withdraw my motion to adopt the MOU.
okay. Well, is there someone who would like to move it?
I'll second.
Well, somebody needs to move it.
Oh,
We lost our move, so we need to move.
I move that we accept.
Okay,
And
And
I'll
who's
keep my
that?
second.
okay. You can second it a second time. Okay. All right. The rest of you have no discussion on this or question? Yeah, the rest of you have no question. If not, all those of adopting this resolution or this memo of understanding, somebody, I hear myself a couple of times, but that's okay. Just say aye if you approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. For those that want to abstain? I saw his lips move.
Yeah, present.
Present, okay. All right, any opposed? None? All right, the memo is understood. Now let's go to resolution 9-19/20, class of 2020 graduation requirements. Is there a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve that resolution.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now questions are, VJ asked a question earlier. Maybe you'd like to ask it again?
No, she already answered it because she
Okay.
understood what I was asking.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns about it? If not, all in favor, say
Aye.
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 okay, that sounded unanimous. All right, and now we have public comments. Is there a way to do that? Diana?
Yeah, I believe that there's a way that people can comment on the YouTube live streaming, and that Michael Klebe, who's on board here, is following the live streaming. Michael, do we have? Okay. Do we have any?
Yeah, it looks like on the chat there was some questions, Diana.
So,
Okay. What are the questions? Oh, okay.
good.
Thanks, Nathan. Is that it then?
I think that's it.
Okay, we have an executive session. Will there be any action as a result of that? No action. So we will now figure out how to do executive session. And I think I have to go to my other computer to get the message on how to get with you guys on that.
I'll push that out to your emails again right now, the connection. So I say that we start executive session in 5 minutes at 6:58.
Okay.
Chance to get on there. And
All
then
right.
we'll mark that time.
Okay. So do we go ahead and close this out then?
Yep. Thank you all.
I'm not
Thanks.
sure how it got on, let alone close it out.